Okay, let's dive right into this fascinating paradox. Today, we're exploring the absolute heart of the Bodhisattva path. We're unpacking a concept from a profound philosophical text that honestly sounds a bit contradictory at first. Think about it. Dedicating your entire existence to learning absolutely everything there is to know about the world, while simultaneously holding the core belief that everything in this world is fundamentally empty. How does that even work? I mean, why would anyone do that? Well, that is exactly the paradox we're unraveling in this explainer today.
So this brings us to a brilliant intellectual dilemma posed by Subhuti. Now, he's one of the Buddha's most analytical disciples, and he's confused. And honestly, his confusion makes a ton of sense. He's basically asking, okay, if all worldly phenomena are ultimately empty, meaning they don't have any permanent inherent existence, why on earth must a bodhisattva dedicate themselves to learning absolutely everything? Why bother studying worldly laws, or complex meditation states, or the deep intricacies of human psychology if reality is just a void? Isn't that just playing games and an illusion?
The Buddha's response to Subhuti just cuts right to the core of what it actually means to be a bodhisattva. He says, if sentient beings knew all dharmas were empty, the bodhisattva wouldn't need to learn anything, but sentient beings do not know this. Just think about that for a second. It is a profound statement of pure empathy. A bodhisattva doesn't engage with all the complex rules of the world because they think those rules are permanent or real. They act because the rest of us are trapped in the illusion. We are suffering terribly because we think this stuff is absolute reality.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast in how ordinary beings and bodhisattvas experience the exact same reality. For us sentient beings, we grasp at illusions, right? We view our successes, our failures, our possessions, our egos as incredibly solid and permanent. And when those things inevitably change, we suffer. But then you have the bodhisattvas. They understand conditional arising. They see that everything exists only because of a temporary web of causes and conditions, so it's fundamentally empty of a permanent self. And this difference in mindset is exactly why sentient beings suffer and why bodhisattvas are so driven to act. To make this perfectly clear, the ancient text gives us this brilliant, timeless analogy. Picture a young child playing in the dirt. They gather some soil, pretend it's grain. They grab some grass, pretend they're animals. To that child, right in that moment, those toys are fiercely real. So someone steps on their dirt grain, they are going to weep bitterly. Now, an adult watching this knows the grain is literally just dirt. But a compassionate adult doesn't just ignore the child's tears and coldly say, hey, it's just dirt, get over it. No. The adult steps into the child's world and comforts them based on what the child is actually experiencing. The bodhisattva is that adult. They know the world is ultimately empty, but they step in to ease our very real suffering anyway.
And this brings us to a fundamental concept known as skillful means, or upaya. Because sentient beings are trapped in so many different types of suffering, a bodhisattva has to develop an infinite toolkit to help them. This is that compassionate necessity we were talking about, learning all worldly and spiritual methods to effectively guide others out of the illusion. It's like a rescue mission in a massive, incredibly complex maze. You simply cannot guide someone out of a maze if you stubbornly refuse to learn the layout of the maze yourself, right? So the bodhisattva learns the entire maze, every trap, every dead end, every psychological hurdle, not to live in the maze, but to lead others to the exit.
So, the crucial point is, how do they pull this off? How does a bodhisattva engage so deeply with the pain, the drama, and the highly complex laws of this worldly maze without getting totally trapped in it themselves? I mean, if you're constantly diving headfirst into the messy reality of human suffering to help people, how do you avoid getting pulled under by the exact same attachments and frustrations you're trying to cure?
The text answers this with a really striking metaphor: the hot gold pill. Imagine a ball of solid gold glowing intensely with heat. It's incredibly beautiful and obviously highly valuable. But if you try to grab it tightly, it is going to severely burn your hand. The text explains that all phenomenal things, even the good things like spiritual achievements, deep meditative states, or the pride of doing a really good deed, are exactly like this hot gold pill. They might be beautiful and entirely necessary for the path, but the very moment you attach your ego to them, the moment you grasp them tightly and say, this is mine, look what I achieved, you get burned by suffering.
The absolute crux of this entire explainer is the solution to that hot gold pill. It's a concept called non-dwelling, or in Chinese, Wu So Ju. This is the core principle of practicing the Bodhisattva path without dwelling anywhere.
Now, don't get this twisted. Non-dwelling does not mean apathy. It doesn't mean just sitting around doing nothing or not caring. It means engaging perfectly in action and practice without clinging to the act itself, without obsessing over the expected outcome, and crucially, without inflating your own ego. It's about acting with a completely liberated, flowing mind. Essentially, you're holding that hot gold pill gently in the palm of an open hand rather than squeezing it tightly in a closed fist.
This beautifully illustrates how non-dwelling applies to the highest spiritual practices, known as the 6 paramattha's. A bodhisattva executes these flawlessly. They practice boundless giving, flawless morality, and unshakable patience. They engage in tireless vigor, profound meditation, and penetrating wisdom. But here is the secret sauce. They never dwell in them. When they give, they're not sitting there thinking, wow, I'm such a great giver, look at all this good karma I'm racking up. They don't view these practices as some transactional path to get a reward. They just act out of pure, unattached compassion. The action is perfect, but the ego is completely absent.
Right around this point in the text, Supratis starts experiencing some deepening philosophical confusion, and honestly, we might be too. He presses the Buddha further, asking, okay, if everything is empty and we can't attach ourselves to any practice, how do we actually reach the goal? If you can't use a solid path because that's grasping, and you can't use a non-path because that's just doing nothing, how on earth do you attain true enlightenment, or bodhi? How are you supposed to reach a destination if there's no solid road to walk on?
The Buddha's answer here is an absolute paradigm shift. He tells him, bodhi is the path is bodhi. It turns out, enlightenment isn't some distant, shiny destination waiting for you at the end of a long transactional road. Enlightenment is the very nature of non-attached practice itself. When a bodhisattva acts with a mind of complete non-dwelling, like when they help that crying child we talked about without a single trace of ego or expectation, in that exact moment of pure action, the path and the goal are one and the same. Let's move to and see how this builds into an even larger cosmic concept, the creation of a Pure Land. In this tradition, the external world is intimately connected to our internal state. Just look at the dynamic here. On one side, we have the internal work, purifying the mind of grasping, anger, and delusion. And on the other side, we see the result. When a bodhisattva and the beings they teach actually achieve this inner purity, the physical environment naturally reflects it. A pure mind quite literally manifests a beautiful, harmonious Pure Land. The outer world is really just a mirror of our collective inner karma. But of course, before you can create a Pure Land, you've got to start with the basics. The text outlines a really systematic, step-by-step process a bodhisattva uses to clean up what is called coarse karma. You start with the physical, removing tangible harm like killing and stealing. Then you step up and clean up your speech, abandoning lies, gossip, and harsh words. And only then can you effectively tackle the root of it all, those mental poisons of greed, anger, and delusion. You have to stop doing the heavy, destructive actions before you can refine the mind into that state of perfect non-dwelling we were talking about earlier.
Now here is a fascinating detail that really sets the bodhisattva path apart. What actually counts as coarse karma completely changes depending on how advanced you are. For a bodhisattva, avoiding things like murder and theft is a given. But it is radical what else they consider a coarse and impure act. Things like craving personal enlightenment over others. In this tradition, if a bodhisattva suddenly gets tired of helping people and says, you know what, I just want to escape suffering for myself, that is considered breaking their vow. Treating spiritual practice as a transaction, like doing good just to get good karma, is a subtle trap that they view as incredibly coarse. Why? Because it's just another form of grasping that hot gold pill. So let's bring this profound ancient wisdom directly into our own lives right now. The bodhisattva engages with the world entirely out of compassion, mastering every skill possible to help others, yet never dwelling on their own achievements. They practice perfectly without grasping. So I have to ask you, are you holding on to your own hot gold pills too tightly? Are your achievements, your career, your rigid beliefs, or even your self-improvement goals burning your hands because you've attached your entire ego to them? What would happen if you continue to do great work, continue to help others, but finally let go of the grasping? Are you ready to open your hand?